The body was a she, just as Jeanette had told them. Jeanette worked as a spy for whichever resurrection man paid her the best that week, sneaking around funerals, standing just close enough to make sure that whoever was being buried hadn't been given an expensive stone slab atop the coffin to prevent the very crime they were currently committing. "No mort safe and no family," Jeanette had said when she showed up at the door to Monroe's flat in Flesh Market Close, scratching her neck and grinning up at him from beneath her curtain of copper hair. Jeanette couldn't be more than 14, but she was already missing more than a few teeth. Or at least, not much family anyways. Coffin looked cheap too, pine or something like it. "Weren't pregnant, were she?" Monroe had asked hopefully, raising his eyebrows. Doctors were so keen to dissect the bodies of pregnant women that they were willing to pay double. Jeanette shook her head and extended her hand for payment. As soon as darkness fell, Monroe and Davy set out with their wheelbarrow and spades and rope. Davy averted his eyes as he peeled off the body's flimsy grey dress. Even in the darkness, he could feel himself blushing. He had never undressed a live woman before, but he'd lost count of the number of times he'd taken the clothing off a woman the day after she was put in the ground. He looked down at the stone half hidden by dirt and darkness. Penelope Harkness. "Thank you for the 8 guineas, Penelope Harkness," he thought. "Throw it here," Monroe said from below. Davy tossed him the dress. As soon as the woman's clothes were back in her empty coffin, Monroe pulled himself out of the hole and onto the wet grass. "All right," he said, clapping the dirt from his hands. "Let's fill it back in and be done with it now." Monroe didn't say it, but he felt something strange too. An odd thinness in the still air that made it harder to catch his breath. The candle in the rectory window had gone out. "You don't believe she died of the fever, do you?" Davy whispered. The woman's skin wasn't pocked or bloody, but the rumours these days were impossible to ignore, if the Roman fever really was back in Edinburgh. "Course not," Monroe said with certainty. "Don't be daft." Davy exhaled and smiled weakly in the dark. Monroe always knew how to make him feel better, to cast away the fears that crept into his brain like rodents in the walls. Silently, the boys finished their task. The grave was as well covered with soil and weeds as it had been that morning, and the body, stiff with rigor mortis, was in their wheelbarrow, covered by a grey cloak. Something was moving at the edge of the cemetery, along the low stone wall that ran the kirkyard's entire east side. Davy and Monroe both saw it, and they whipped their heads around to follow its motion, but as soon as their eyes adjusted in the darkness, it was gone. "Just a dog," Monroe said more confidently than he felt. "Come on, the doctor likes us out back before dawn." Davy pushed the cart, and Monroe walked alongside him, gripping the handle of his spade tighter than usual. They had almost made it out of the cemetery when 3 men in cloaks stepped in their path. "Hello," the first man said. He was the tallest of the 3, and looked even taller because he wore a stovepipe hat. "Lovely evening," said the second, a bald man, shorter than the others. "Perfect for a stroll," said the third, whose yellow grin was visible behind his moustache, even in the darkness. They weren't night watchmen, Davy saw. Maybe they were fellow resurrection men. Monroe clearly had the same idea. "Out of our way. She's ours. Get your own doornail," he said, stepping in front of Davy and their wheelbarrow. His voice shook only a little. Davy looked down and saw the gentlemen were all wearing fine leather shoes. No resurrection man wore shoes like that. The 3 men laughed together in near unison. "You're quite right,"